Despite a pandemic crisis that has changed the lives of everyone in America, arguably since May, when Democrat Party presidential nominee Joe Biden captured the press with the controversial comment directed toward his most loyal voters about not really being black if they voted for Donald Trump in November, and the last words of George Floyd, "I can't breathe," which has become a battle cry and mantra for the Black Lives Matter movement. The battleground demographic in 2020 has perhaps for the first time in American politics become the battle for the African American vote. And perhaps seizing upon this propitious moment, now Kanye West has decided to toss his hat in the ring, announcing his candidacy for the presidency in July. According to the Pew Research Center, African Americans are perhaps the most religious demographic in American politics, but paradoxically, on matters of religion, are closer to Caucasian evangelical Christians, but yet remain just as segregated from that denomination at the polling place as even Dr. Benjamin Mays, the mentor of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., had observed in the 1950s, that they remain at the most segregated hour in America, Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, albeit not, as Harvard University professor Henry Louis Gates recently observed, by law as much as today by choice. But the most reliable Democrat Party voter by far is the educated African American female, who through a history of slavery became a strong matriarchal figure in the African American family throughout a history of American chattel slavery on the plantation. For both the masters on that plantation, serving as mammies for young children, as well as after emancipation, moving away from a European American tradition that had favored the male child for opportunities in education, and which naturally found a growing class of strong, successful African American women beginning careers in the fields of both primary education as well as nursing, traditional female professions in which their Caucasian counterparts had entered the workforce before opportunities began to emerge for a liberation movement during the Second World War with Rosie the Riveter. And the mayor of the nation's capital fits neatly within that rising tradition of strong African American woman, single at age 47, with an adopted daughter since 2018, and progressive, even appointing an openly lesbian woman as her deputy mayor. Muriel Bowser, a native of D.C., excelled as a student who was blessed with scholarships to attend parochial school for women, and now holds a bachelor's degree in history from Chatham College in Pittsburgh and a master's in public policy from American University, and claims never to have envisioned herself as a politician, but rather as an agency administrator. And on yesterday, in what once had the reputation of being Chocolate City, where according to the National Center on Institutions and Alternatives, NCIA, nearly 50% of black males between the ages of 18 to 35 in the District of Columbia are under criminal justice supervision, announced the broadest sweeping regulation to date to mandate facial coverings, requiring all residents to cover their faces with masks when leaving their homes. Certainly, as both a trained public policy professional and staunch advocate for Black Lives Matter demonstrations that have brought the cries of "I can't breathe" within earshot of the current occupant of the Oval Office, Mayor Bowser is aware that in 2003, researchers from the University of Washington posited that more young black men have done prison time than military service or earned a college degree. Examining statistics for males born between the years 1945 and 1969. In 2013, the progressive Huffington Post warned that 1 in 3 black males will go to prison in their lifetime, compared with 1 in 6 Latinos and 1 in 17 Caucasians. Even PolitiFact verified former presidential candidate Ben Carson's claim in 2015 that there were more African American males in prison or jail than were enslaved in 1850. Certainly, Mayor Bowser is aware that in 2016, backpedaling against alleged proofs that had refuted Carson's claim that there were more African American males in prison than in college, which had been a rallying cry of Barack Obama in 2013, or at least according to the BBC. The Progressive Washington Post reported that for prime-age black men, the unemployment rate would jump from 11% to 19% because a far higher fraction of black men, 7.7%, or 580,000 people, are institutionalized, which is described as a racial chasm as opposed to a racial gap. The most updated, evolving guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, asserts that cloth masks, cloth face coverings, may help prevent people who have COVID-19 from spreading the virus to others. And apparently Mayor Bowser has reversed her position on defunding the police because she has now claimed a police power in the name of public health to assert a doctrine of presumed sickness without establishing good cause. Quoting the 2016 decision of the Supreme Court in Whole Woman's Healthcare v. Hellerstedt, which struck down health regulations in Texas, the most recent abortion case involving similar regulations in Louisiana, June Medical Services, LLC v. Russo, presented the rule that unnecessary health regulations that have the purpose or effect of presenting a substantial obstacle to a woman seeking an abortion impose an undue burden on the right, thus making them constitutionally invalid. But perhaps, as asserted in supporting research upon which the nation's only physician serving as a state governor, Ralph Northam of Virginia, relied, in the face of a pandemic, the search for perfect evidence may be the enemy of good policy, triggering for implementation of government regulation under UNESCO's precautionary principle, a doctrine that first appeared in the United Nations World Charter for Nature and included in the 1987 Montreal Protocols, according to Northam's research, but rejected by American courts under the traditional disposition of the courts to eschew speculative damages. Current CDC guidance only recently began to clarify the distinction between ingress and egress infection, and only now explicitly clarifies that cloth face coverings are recommended as a simple barrier to help prevent respiratory droplets from traveling into the air and onto other people when the person wearing the cloth face covering coughs, sneezes, talks, or raises their voice. And now, CDC has admitted that this form of infectious disease mitigation is clinically referred to as source control. The state's control over the source of infection. And 6 of the 15 references upon which the most recent CDC guidance relies expressly report on findings regarding what has been referred to as asymptomatic infection. The CDC guidance now states that COVID-19 can be spread by people who do not have symptoms and do not know that they are infected. And they urge that's why it's important for everyone to wear cloth face coverings in public settings and practice social distancing, staying at least 6 feet away from other people. However, under the common law, as recognized in the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as most other states, a fraud is perpetrated when anyone makes a false representation, known to be false at the time, and which places the hearer in detrimental reliance. And case law often describes these transactions as unconscionable because they exploit the ignorance of their victims. And the law generally enforces a heightened sense of duty to those possessed of special training and knowledge or in a fiduciary relationship where they are responsible for others. And that moral obligation imposed by law demands that they perform due diligence and take extra care when making statements to persons who rely upon them and trust their opinions. And did you know that when you are sneezing or coughing, you are not presenting symptoms of any disease condition at all, but rather what trained physicians describe as signs of illness? But you may be asymptomatically transmitting disease, which is why responsible adults generally do not rely upon the law from the government to compel them to cover their mouth or nose and not sneeze or cough on others, like children often do. Or does Mayor Bowser and Governor Northam simply want us to obey the doctor's orders and become the wards of the state, so a beneficent dictator can provide everything we need and tell us everything that we need to think? At the very beginning of Federalist number 51, describing checks and balances, James Madison wrote that where annual elections end, tyranny begins. And our whole constitutional heritage rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control men's minds. Whatever the power of the state to control public dissemination of ideas inimical to the public morality, it cannot constitutionally premise legislation on the desirability of controlling a person's private thoughts. In Federalist 53, James Madison reserved to an extra republic, comprised of the competing religious sects, to form the community conscience. And that extra republic of competing religious sects was to serve as a check and balance against tyranny. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress with liberty, honor, and excellence. By God, we shall make America great again. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.